Welcome to This Explainer. We're going to peel back the layers of economic jargon today to figure out the true health of a nation. We hear massive numbers thrown around on the news all the time. Trillions of rupees, huge growth percentages. But what do those numbers actually mean for real people? Let's dive right into the Indian economy and find out together.
Let's kick things off with a hypothetical. Say you're earning 50,000 rupees a year. Out of nowhere, bam, your income doubles to 100,000. Are you twice as rich? I mean, instinct says absolutely, right? But hold on. What if the cost of rent, groceries, and getting around also doubled right at the exact same time? Your actual purchasing power literally hasn't budged. At the end of the day, it's not the number printed on your paycheck that matters. It's what that money actually buys out there in the real world. That purchasing power? That's exactly what economists mean when they talk about your real income.
Let's look at a super simplified example using some historical data just to see how this math shakes out. Imagine an economy that literally only produces one thing. Let's just call it good X. Back in 1991, the whole nation's money income was 30,000 rupees, and 1 unit of X cost 40 rupees. Do the math, and the nation could afford exactly 750 units of real physical stuff. Fast forward 5 years to 1996, money income shoots up to 50,000 rupees. That is a massive 66% jump. Sounds great, right? But look at the price of X. It also went up, hitting 50 rupees. So when you divide that shiny new income by the new price, the country can actually only buy 1,000 units. That huge 66% jump in money only bought a 33% increase in real, tangible goods. So today, we're unpacking 6 key concepts to really understand all this. We're looking at money versus real income, India's true national income, how we define economic growth, growth versus economic development, the per capita reality, and finally, labor and the system. Let's get to it. Section 1. Money versus real income. To get an accurate read on the national economy, we have to take that personal purchasing power idea and scale it all the way up to the entire country. Economists essentially track national wealth using 2 completely different yardsticks. First, you've got NICUP, national income at current prices. This is the money income we just talked about. It's just the raw total of all wages, rents, interest, and profits. But then you have NICOP, national income at constant prices. And here's the thing. NICOP is the ultimate truth teller. By actively adjusting for price changes and inflation, it measures the actual physical output of goods and services being produced. It's the real income. If you want to know if a country is genuinely generating more wealth, NICOP is the metric that cuts straight through the inflationary noise. Moving on to Section 2, India's true national income. Let's look at the data, because it's fascinating how often these 2 numbers tell totally conflicting stories about India's economic health over time. Take the 1973 to 1974 financial year, for example. If you were only looking at the money income, the NICOP, you'd think the economy was absolutely on fire, posting a staggering 23.2% increase. But wait, when we strip away the massive price inflation from that year and analyze the trend in real income, actual physical output only grew by less than 5%. The vast majority of that so-called growth, total illusion, just inflation playing tricks on the ledger. And it gets even wilder. Let's jump to the 1991 to 1992 timeframe. The nation's money income jumped by a very healthy-looking 14.7%. You'd assume everyone was doing so much better. But true physical production actually fell by 0.1%. Let that sink in. The entire 14.7% increase in national money income was a complete mirage caused purely by inflation. The country actually produced slightly fewer real goods than the year prior. This is exactly why simply comparing current prices over time can be so dangerously misleading. Which brings us to Section 3, defining economic growth. Because of these crazy inflationary illusions, economists have to be super strict about what actually counts as progress. When we talk about actual economic growth, we are strictly looking at the rate of change in that true physical output, the NICOP. If we analyze the trend in the rate of growth of the Indian economy over time, we see a really clear story of momentum building. For 3 whole decades, from 1951 to 1981, average annual growth was stubbornly stuck right around 3%. But then things started to shift. In the 80s, the average annual growth rate jumped to 5.4%. And by the mid-90s, specifically 95 to 96, it hit nearly 7%. This acceleration didn't happen in a vacuum either. It was heavily driven by major economic reforms, import liberalization, and privatization that finally opened the Indian economy to the global stage.
Now for Section 4, growth versus economic development. We know what economic growth is now, but here's the catch. Just having more resources overall doesn't automatically mean citizens are actually experiencing a better quality of life.
That brings us to a really beautiful definition from the economist Gerald Meyer. He defined economic development as simply growth plus change. I love that. If economic growth is just a quantitative bump in physical output, economic development brings in the qualitative side. It's all those necessary structural, social, and institutional upgrades that have to happen right alongside rising incomes. Because while economic growth is literally just a rising number on a spreadsheet, economic development has real, human-centric goals. True development means we are actively analyzing and fighting the severe extent of poverty and the deep-rooted income inequalities that have historically challenged India. It's about ensuring every single person hits minimum consumption levels, drastically reducing unemployment, and spreading modern knowledge. Look, a country can experience a temporary burst of growth if they randomly strike a massive oil reserve, but they only achieve true development if they use that wealth to actively lift their poorest citizens and distribute resources fairly over decades of hard work. Section 5. The per capita reality. To see if this development is actually making it to the individual person, we have to look past the grand national totals. We do this using per capita real national income. The math here is beautifully simple. You just take the total physical output of the nation, our trusty NICOP, and divide it by the total population. It shows us the average slice of the economic pie available to each citizen. If the whole point of development is to raise living standards, well, this is your ultimate scoreboard. But here is where we hit the biggest mathematical drag on India's per capita development. It all comes down to this one number, 2%. Historically, the Indian population has grown at a rapid rate of roughly 2% every single year. When you analyze the trends in per capita real income against total national growth, a massive gap opens up. Because the population was expanding so fast, it essentially swallowed 2 percentage points of the national income growth every single year. So if the nation's total physical output grew by a solid 4%, the average individual only felt a 2% bump in their actual day-to-day standard of living. It makes personal progress feel painfully slow, and it shows exactly why you have to look at per capita income when you're trying to understand real-world poverty. Finally, Section 6, Labor and the System. Let's take a quick look at the foundational resource driving literally all of these metrics: the people themselves. The labor force is totally unique because it plays a dual role. People are the workers supplying the production, and they're the consumers driving the demand. But to gauge the true health of this system, we have to look at how this labor is actually organized. We need to analyze the trend in work participation rates, meaning how much of the population is actually actively employed. We also have to track the changes in the occupational structure. Are workers stuck in traditional, low-yield agriculture, or are they transitioning over to high-tech services and manufacturing? Plus, the efficiency of this entire engine depends heavily on the main features of the Indian economic system itself, specifically how industries are organized and the balance between public and private ownership. When you improve the workforce's education while simultaneously optimizing how businesses are owned and run, you fundamentally upgrade the whole economy. So, we've covered a ton of ground today, right? We've moved from the illusions of money income to the hard truths of physical output, per capita growth, and what genuine economic development actually looks like. Next time you see a politician or an article hyping up massive economic figures, you now have the exact tools you need to cut straight through the noise. You can ask the most important question of all: are we merely increasing our money, or are we truly developing as a society? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking the right questions.